It was a light, rainy night, the kind where tiny drops just drift down from the sky like the air's quietly weeping. I was out delivering pasta on my motorbike, working for this little Italian joint on the edge of town. It was close to midnight, and the streets were empty except for the occasional passing car. I had one last order to drop off some fettuccine and garlic bread. The route took me to the edge of a neighborhood I'd never been to before. Not even a real neighborhood, honestly. More like a stretch of fancy-looking houses sitting in a row at the far end of a long road, one that seemed to just dead end into the dark. I rode slowly, rain dotting my glasses, tires whispering over wet asphalt. The air smelled damp and earthy, like freshly disturbed soil and pine. None of the houses had any lights on. They looked clean and well kept, not broken or falling apart, but every single one of them felt hollow. The houses were far apart. Between them, the wild bushes and tall, messy hedges looked dark and thick against the faint light. It felt like a real forest was waiting right behind their neat yards. I double-checked the address on my phone. It led me to what looked like an abandoned house. Not wrecked, but too quiet. No porch light, no car in the driveway, and no sound. I got off my motorbike, set the delivery bag over my shoulder, and walked up to the door. The driveway pavement was cracked and moss was growing through the gaps. I knocked. Nothing. No footsteps. No voice. Not even a shuffle from inside. I waited for a few seconds before hearing something. A soft honk. Just one. I turned my head toward the sound. A car was parked a little further down, near the edge of the empty lot next to the house. That lot wasn't empty. It was just a wall of dark, tangled woods. I hadn't noticed the car earlier. Its wipers were moving slowly, brushing away the mist. Inside, I could just barely make out a man with a thick beard sitting behind the wheel. He didn't get out, just raised his hand and made a small motion. He was telling me to come over. I stood there, confused. The house was empty. The guy in the car was watching me. The street behind me was dark and silent. The only sound was the distant, unsettling hum of the nearby woods and the soft patter of the rain. Something about it didn't sit right. I backed off the porch slowly, the pasta still warm in my hand. My eyes flicked from the car to the house, back to the man. He hadn't moved. The only thing alive in that moment were the windshield wipers dragging back and forth like clock hands ticking down to something. He again gave a sign to come. Now he must have said something, which I did not hear, but saw his moving lips. I stood frozen, unsure. I went close. I saw him before he could open the door. He was in t-shirt, but with only briefs. The pasta was falling, and for a long second, neither of us moved. The man didn't say anything. He just stared at me, blinking slowly behind the glass, like he couldn't believe I'd actually walked up. Something about his eyes. It wasn't rage or threat, but hunger mixed with hesitation. I looked down at the pavement. My feet were on the edge of the puddle, and the rain had soaked through my socks. He tapped the window. Once, then again, this time faster. I flinched. The way he tapped, it was like he was trying to wake me up. I could see a takeout container on the passenger seat next to him, already opened, fork still inside. He hadn't been waiting for food. He was waiting for something else. He leaned forward and mouthed something again. Something I didn't catch, but he looked irritated now. Like I was the one wasting his time. Like I was supposed to understand. The motor in my head finally turned over. I shook my head and stepped back. And when I did, his whole body stiffened, like I'd ruined whatever plan he had. His fingers tightened around the wheel. His face dropped out of sight for a moment like he was bending forward. That was it. That was all I needed to see. I turned and ran, got on my motorbike and rode. Fast. I didn't stop until I was at the main road again, back under streetlights and around other people. Later, I told my manager what happened. He pulled up the order details, and turns out The number and name were fake, just like that address. The timestamp on the last order read exactly 9:25 p.m. And according to him, mine wasn't the first weird delivery in that area. Someone had been placing fake orders, then waiting around in parked cars. It's always at the road's end, right where the trees start, watching, signaling. I don't know what the guy wanted, but whatever it was, I wasn't going to be the one to find out. I was 19, and for the first time, my parents had left me alone for a full weekend in our suburban home. Most people my age would throw a party, but I had a different plan. It was New Year's Eve, and while the rest of the neighborhood was out at countdown parties, whereas I'd promised my followers a special midnight seafood feast mukbang to ring in the new year, the day started with a weird ping. Around 2 p.m., while I was prepping 3 pounds of king crab and spicy noodles, my friend Leo, who lives directly across the street, sent me a DM. "Yo, who's the guy in the reflective vest in your driveway? Utility worker?" I wiped my hands and checked the front window. The street was dead silent, the gray winter sky casting long, cold shadows over the patches of melting snow. No trucks, no vests. I told Leo he was seeing things. He didn't drop it, though. He insisted he saw a guy leaning over, trying to peer through the gap in our dining room curtains. I laughed it off, as Leo being a bored troll, and got back to my setup. By 9 p.m., I was live. I had the ring light blinding me, the high-gain microphone ready to catch every crunch, and a massive spread of food. Outside, I could hear the occasional distant pop of a firework, but inside the house felt eerily insulated. I was an hour into the stream, chatting with my viewers and tearing into a crab leg, when the chat started moving too fast to read. User 99, look at the kitchen doorway. Hungry ghost, is that a prank? Lol, who is that? Spice King, dude, someone is behind you. I froze, a noodle halfway to my mouth. I turned around, but the kitchen was a sea of shadows behind my bright filming lights. I couldn't see anything. Very funny, guys, I said to the camera, forced a laugh and kept eating. But my heart was hammering against my ribs. I decided to take a bathroom break just to check the house. I left the camera running. It's better for the algorithm anyway. I walked through the downstairs, flicking on every single light. The house felt heavy, like the air had grown thick. I checked the side window in the laundry room. It was locked, but the glass felt ice cold against my palm. I went back to the stream, trying to regain my rhythm. I was finishing the last of the noodles when I noticed something chilling. My headphones were high fidelity. They picked up everything. As I chewed, I heard a faint, rhythmic thump creak coming from the stairs behind me. I stopped chewing. The sound stopped. I took a deliberate, loud bite of a rice cake. Crunch. A split second later, a soft clack echoed from the floorboards in the hallway. They were mimicking me. Every time I made a sound for the stream, they moved, using my own noise to mask their footsteps. I didn't look back. I didn't want the person to know I knew. I looked at the chat, which was now a blur of call the police and run. I grabbed my phone, typed a quick text to Leo. Call 911. Someone is in the house. Don't call me. I stayed in front of the camera pretending to read comments, my hands shaking so hard I had to hide them under the table. I picked up a piece of food, but my throat felt tight and dry. I tried to smile for the camera, but my face felt like a mask. Every time I made a loud noise, I listened for a sound in the dark kitchen. I started talking faster and louder just to drown out the silence of the house. I felt like an animal in a cage with a bright light shining on me. I knew that if I stopped talking, the person behind me might move closer. I watched the chat messages fly past. Everyone was telling me to run, but my legs felt like lead. I was trapped in my own chair, waiting for a hand to touch my shoulder. In the distance, I heard a chorus of car horns and cheers. Midnight had hit, and the world was celebrating while I sat frozen. Suddenly, Leo's name popped up in a private message. I see him. He just jumped out your pantry window. He's heading for the woods behind the fence. Cops are 2 minutes out. I bolted. I didn't stop until I was out the front door and standing in the middle of the street in the freezing January air, surrounded by the smell of spent fireworks. The police found the side window had been jimmied open with a screwdriver. They also found a series of slushy, melting footprints that led from the kitchen, stayed exactly 6 feet behind my streaming chair, and followed me halfway up the stairs before retreating. The creepiest part wasn't just that he was in there. It was that when the police reviewed my stream archive, they saw him in the dark background. A pale face had emerged from the shadows of the hallway 3 different times. He wasn't there to rob me. He was just watching me eat. He's still out there. Every New Year's Eve, I stay in a hotel. Every time I hear someone chew too loudly, I find myself looking for the shadow in the doorway.
The internet is a vast landscape where trends shift with incredible speed. It is often baffling how certain foolish behaviors become global sensations. Some of these trends are harmless, while others become life-threatening incidents that serve as a grim, cautionary tale. One of the most notorious examples is the tragedy of a deadly mukbang broadcast. Mukbang involves individuals consuming a massive variety and large quantity of food while recording the act. It is yet another weird phenomenon that captured the internet's attention. Tracy Leo is a 17-year-old girl who was deeply keen on starting a career as an influencer. She was constantly looking for any possible option to become an internet celebrity. Having just finished school, she decided to venture into digital fame. She tried many different content styles, but she failed at all of them. It was during this period of trial and error that she came across the mukbang community. When she started, she would introduce herself and announce it was eating time. Since it was a relatively new niche at the time, she decided to commit to it fully. She kicked off her new channel by attempting to eat the entire McDonald's menu in a single sitting. As she ate, she talked. Her mouth was so full that nobody could understand what she was saying. She mostly made muffled sounds while chewing. She worked her way through every drink and every meal on the menu. However, her body eventually gave out. In the middle of the broadcast, she puked everything up. Ironically, that specific instance of physical failure became her ticket to fame. It took about a month for the video to reach a wide audience, but once it did, it became a sensation. Her channel picked up views after views, and she began adapting her content to keep the momentum going. She started running polls to let her fans decide which menu she should tackle next. She invited people to request specific meals. Her channel was soon flooded with comments. Local diners and national chains began reaching out to sponsor her videos, and she accepted many of these deals. She was earning a significant income from these sponsorships by the end of the year. She saved enough money to pay for her entire college education. However, the requests from her fans were becoming increasingly nasty and strange. Some people asked her to eat rare, dangerous plants, while others suggested live animals. Despite the weirdness, her growing view count turned her into a genuine mukbang phenomenon. Eventually, she received the deal of a lifetime. A diner known as Marble Heights offered her $100,000 to consume their entire signature menu. Tracy decided to stream the entire event on her channel to maximize the impact. Because her audience was now huge, she had approximately 30,000 people watching her from the very first second the stream went live. She began the challenge with a fresh batch of honey-dipped pancakes and then moved on to an egg, bacon, and grilled cheese sandwich. These first 2 meals were incredibly heavy and took her nearly 10 minutes to finish. Despite the nature of her work, Tracy made sure she stayed in good physical shape. She was 18 years old and possessed a slim, fit body that seemed at odds with the amount of food she consumed. This physical contrast likely attracted more viewers as people were fascinated by someone who could enjoy so much greasy food while maintaining a perfect physique. After devouring the sandwiches, she moved on to a large bucket of chicken. Once that was finished, she brought out blueberry pastries and began chugging apple juice to wash them down. Almost immediately, a weird redness began to spread across her face, but she ignored it and kept going. She moved on to bacon and hamburgers, followed by frosted coffee with ice cream. She then ate a bowl of clam chowder and another plate of bacon-greased cheese sliders. She ended the mukbang by drinking a lime soda. This helped relieve the acid buildup in her chest. As her viewers commented on how amazing she was, the redness on her face intensified. One of the audience members happened to be a doctor, and he posted an urgent warning. He told her she was likely experiencing a heart attack and that she needed to call 911 immediately. Tracy saw the comment, but ignored the gravity of the situation. She joked that the menu definitely felt like a heart attack. She laughed and told her audience that she was a regular at the gym and wasn't like a typical unhealthy person who couldn't handle a big meal. However, in the middle of her sentence, she felt a heavy pressure. She moved her hand quickly to grab her phone and call an ambulance, but she collapsed face down into her plates of food before she could dial. The comment section went silent for a moment before people began to freak out. After a while, the live stream showed paramedics arriving at her home. They performed CPR on her, and the very first thing they did was reach over and close the camera lens. That was the first death witnessed live. In the aftermath, the Marble Heights meal became known as the heart attack menu and became a viral challenge among other eaters. Ironically, no one else died from eating it. It was eventually revealed it wasn't a heart attack. It was a severe blueberry allergy she never knew she had. Today, the video of her final meal still exists in the dark corners of the internet. People watched the moment she ate those blueberry pastries, pointing at the screen when the redness first appeared. The empty plates and the spilled lime soda stay frozen in time on the recording. Fans leave comments of regret, wishing she had listened to the doctor instead of the cheers of the crowd. Her empty gym clothes and her college books remain untouched in her room. It is a sad reminder that chasing digital fame can sometimes cost more than anyone should ever pay.
When I was 10 years old, my life changed completely because my family moved to a new house after my dad accepted a job offer. It was a difficult time for me. I had to leave my old neighborhood. I had to say goodbye to all my friends and start over. Both my sister and I found it hard to get used to things in this unfamiliar place. One afternoon, we were feeling quite bored. We decided to take a hike to explore the new woods surrounding our property. The forest was most dense directly behind our house, where the sound of a running stream filled the air. We had been walking for about an hour when a loud snap came from the nearby bushes, which immediately freaked out my little sister. She had always been a jumpy person, but I was stubborn. I insisted that we carry on with our adventure. It was roughly 5 minutes after that initial sound when nature suddenly went silent all around us. It felt like we were being watched. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it truly felt like there wasn't just the two of us out there. I was certain that something was hiding in the shadows, staring right at us. Then, the heavy silence of the forest was broken by a strange yell. It sounded like a screeching cat, but the noise was more drawn out and much, much deeper. This was immediately followed by the distressed call of a deer, and then everything went back to utter silence. Because the call had come from only about 100 yards away, we panicked and bolted. Whatever was out there began gaining on us quickly. In my absolute panic, I pushed my sister into a thick thorn bush and followed right after her. I was too shocked to even feel the pain. We held each other tightly in our hiding spot until we heard a deep growl coming from our right. Slowly, we turned our heads to look, bracing ourselves to come face to face with a beast. However, when we looked, there was nothing there. Instead, a horrific stench hit us, a smell like sulfur, bodily waste, and copper. Then we heard a scratching sound coming from above us. We snapped our heads up to look. What we saw would scar us for the rest of our lives. We saw a creature with a body shape similar to a panther. It was light gray with a distinct black stripe running down its spine. Its head looked more like a boar's head, and its feet were like the paws of a dog, yet it had no tail. Its eyes were a misty blue, making it look as though it were blind. Suddenly, the creature snapped its head to look directly at us, and I swear that it smiled. It was a sight that no human being should ever have to see. It had teeth like sharp razors, and red fluid seemed to be dripping from its yellowish fang. We turned and ran. We ran as fast as we could, and we did not look back once. We kept running even as the sounds of branches snapping and the deep growls and grunts of the creature echoed behind us. When we finally reached the edge of our property, the sound of the heavy paw steps faded away. We ran straight to our front door, threw it open and slammed it shut. We were so overwhelmed by exhaustion and terror that we passed out on the couch immediately. My sister and I still talk about this incident to this day. Every single time we bring it up, that same spark of fear blazes in her eyes. She was perfect. Raw potential wrapped in a deceptively sweet smile. When I first found Zuyang, drifting after dropping out of university, I saw it instantly. Not just her looks, but the way she ate. Mechanical, endless, yet paired with an innocent charm that drew people in. It was rare. The timing could not have been better. COVID arrived. People were trapped indoors, desperate for distraction, and suddenly watching others gorge themselves online became an obsession. Mukbang exploded, and she fit it perfectly. I convinced her that this was more than eating, that it was a performance, and that she had something special. I made her believe she could be adored, that money and fame were waiting. I told her I would guide her, shape her, and make her famous as long as she trusted me. She did, and it worked. Subscribers flooded in, views multiplied. She became Korea's darling mukbanger, my darling. Built from nothing, shaped by my hand. But fame has a way of corrupting people. She started forgetting her place, thinking she was more than just a girl who eats on camera, thinking she had control. Sometimes discipline was necessary. Sometimes reminders were necessary. She needed to remember who was in charge. She bruised easily. She was sensitive. Always clumsy, especially around those grills she insisted on using. The fans noticed, of course. The charity donation, $144,000, was my idea. Good public relations, clean image. They saw an angel. They never saw the strings. When she started thinking about leaving, I reminded her of reality. I let her understand what would happen if certain private moments were exposed. I made sure she imagined the shame, her family, her fans, the collapse of everything she had. Fear bloomed exactly as expected. She stayed, she smiled, she obeyed. She needed structure, so I created it, an agency, my agency. I framed it as professionalism, contracts, management, protection from stress. I handled the deals. She focused on eating. A 70-30 split in my favor was fair. I built everything. She hesitated, but she signed. She always did in the end. The money poured in, $3 million. My rightful share earned. Then the parasites appeared, cyber wreckers, bottom feeders like Jay, Din, and Caracula, desperate to attach themselves to real success. Akura, an idiot and supposedly Jay's friend, got hold of a useless recording. Gossip about her past, hostess bar trash, a tax issue I was managing, a sponsorship deal I negotiated. They thought they could blackmail my asset. Amateurs. Jay and Din tried for a pathetic $7,000. I had already secured a proper management fee of $40,000. They didn't understand the game. Akura didn't bury it. He handed it to Pan, another wrecker trying to clean up his friend's involvement in the old Mariang 44 mess. Pan passed it to Kim, a self-righteous hypocrite chasing attention. Kim saw an opportunity and leaked everything. My business, my life. The narrative flipped overnight. The internet turned. Questions spread. Her past, the hostess bar, taxes. Suddenly, I was the villain. All because she couldn't keep her past buried, and vultures wanted their cut. Then she went live, July 11th. Tears, a carefully spun story. 4 years of abuse, she claimed. Sexual assault, extortion, illegal filming, financial exploitation. All lies. Discipline reframed as cruelty. Structure twisted into crimes. She tried to destroy me. The contract was fair. The recordings were necessary. The leverage was necessary. After everything I did for her, she turned on me. Then came the lawsuit. Claims of unpaid earnings and contract termination. Everything was written clearly, yet they ignored it. They played an audio clip, Sounds ripped from context. A slammed door, muffled screams, my voice distorted into something monstrous. They cornered me. Media. Public opinion. Her lawyers with their so-called evidence. Thousands of recordings. Thousands of photos. It didn't matter how they got them. The damage was done. My agency, my reputation, my money, all threatened. All because of her. She couldn't handle the life I gave her. Ungrateful. They wanted a monster. They pushed me into it. Fine. Let them pick through the wreckage. But they should know this was never my fault. It was always hers. She pushed me to this. They all did. My only regret? Maybe I should have controlled her better from the very beginning.
After the story ends, I want you to hear this from me. I know he tried to control the narrative and share his own version of events. For a long time, people only heard his side. Behind the camera, my manager, who was also my ex-boyfriend, controlled me. He took most of my earnings and used private recordings to keep me afraid. When I went live, it wasn't a breakdown. It was me telling the truth. With help, I released 3,800 files that exposed everything. This is where the story really ends, with the truth, and with me choosing myself.
I truly hate mukbangs. They're incredibly annoying and disgusting to watch. In my opinion, gluttony is not a trait that should be glorified by society, and I have a specific story that explains why I feel this way. At the time, I was a small guy living in a modest 2-room apartment with my girlfriend. She worked as a publicist for a specific influencer who made a living by filming himself eating massive amounts of food, because her job required constant meetups with him. I used to join her on these visits, though I was mostly annoyed by his personality. Things were always messy at his house. It was a large, pretentious mansion. It felt very uncomfortable. He would constantly start his recordings with an annoying, loud voice to introduce himself. I was always weirded out by the setting of his home and the strange energy of his career. During one of his filming sessions, he tried to call me onto his channel to participate in the meal. He asked me why I wouldn't just come and join them for the video. I refused his offer and told him that I was fine, but he kept insisting. Eventually, he looked at me and asked if I had a personal problem with him. I told him directly that I simply did not like to be on camera or engage in gluttonous eating. He was very quick to take offense at my choice of words and looked extremely bitter about the rejection. When we got back home, my girlfriend mentioned that he was pissed and annoyed by my behavior. I told her that I was just as annoyed with him, but she informed me that he was demanding a formal apology. I initially refused to give him one, however. My girlfriend warned me that he was a total psycho who would do anything to get what he wanted. I eventually told her I would do it a day later. I just wanted to move on. That same night, he suddenly barged into our little apartment with his men. They grabbed my girlfriend and me, tied us up and warned us that we were going to do the mukbang. With a gun held to our heads and a camera positioned in front of us, he pulled out a mountain of food that was enough to feed 10 people. Because we were absolutely terrified, we obeyed. We decided to do exactly as we were told. We stuffed ourselves with the food despite knowing our bodies could not take it. We eventually puked, but we were forced to continue eating and eating. We ate every bit of it until we genuinely felt like we were going to die. Suddenly, the influencer started shouting and pointing his fingers at us. He announced that the entire thing was just a prank. He claimed that we had been fooled. He laughed and told us to relax because he had caught the whole prank on camera. My girlfriend and I were far too traumatized to even react in that moment. The next morning, I went to the station and filed a police complaint against the psychopath. Upon further negotiation, he tried to reimburse us for the emotional pain he had caused us. He ended up paying us $200,000 for his prank. I demanded that he apologize to us directly. However, he never actually apologized to our faces. My girlfriend was given a different influencer to manage. This idiot made a YouTube apology video instead. He actually made money from the views on his apology. He was nothing more than a gluttonous, psychopathic mukbang eater. And now, every time I walk through the front door, I remember him barging in with his men. We tried to use the money to forget, but the walls remind us of the fear. I look at the floor where we were tied up and I feel sick. My girlfriend stays quiet when she sees a camera. We eat our small meals in silence now. That influencer is still famous and rich, while we are trapped in the place where he hurt us. The trauma never truly leaves this home. After that whole messed up situation, things didn't exactly go back to normal, but we managed to survive. My girlfriend, bless her, somehow stuck by me, and we eventually got married, still living in that same little 2-room apartment. Then came the biggest, most wonderful change. She got pregnant. She was 8 months along now, maybe a little more. She was glowing and healthy, but our financial situation went from bad to worse when the company we worked for shut down. We tried doing script work for other influencers, but it was not nearly enough to book a decent hospital for the baby's arrival, which was coming any day now. The stress was immense. Then, like a bad dream revisiting, he messaged. He did not message me, thankfully, but my wife. A notification popped up on her phone from the mukbang guy and my blood ran cold. She told me he wanted a deal. He offered $500,000 in exchange for 3 videos, 12 minutes each. $500,000 was an obscene amount of money. It was life-changing. It was enough for the hospital and everything we needed for the baby. However, the cost was going back into that world. We talked for hours. The trauma of before weighing heavily on us. My wife said softly while resting her hand on her belly that we needed the money. She acknowledged that she knew it was him, but the necessity was too great. I squeezed her hand and told her we would do it for the sake of the baby, even though the words felt like ash in my mouth. We messaged back just one word, okay? A few hours later, $200,000 hit our account, and the deal was sealed. The first video was bizarre and disturbing. He wanted me to eat fast food scattered directly on the floor. It felt degrading, unsanitary, and just plain wrong. It only got about 12,000 views, which made it a total flop. His career was clearly not reviving. The second video was even weirder, involving me eating while shaving my beard. Again, it felt like he was just trying to humiliate me. It got 4,500 views. We were 2 videos in with 0 success. Pressure mounted for the third video. He insisted my wife had to be in this one. Reluctantly, with fear churning inside us, we agreed. We went to his house, which was even dirtier than before. He was bigger than I remembered, easily 500 pounds or maybe more. He seemed almost molded into the sofa. The concept for the third video was a healthy pregnancy mukbang. My wife sat beside him while I stayed behind the camera. He just passed her fruits, dry fruits, salads, and milkshakes. It was supposed to be a wholesome thing. We were about 6 minutes into the recording when suddenly my wife gasped. Her hand flew to her belly and her eyes went wide with alarm. I whispered a question to her, lowering the camera slightly to see. She choked out that her water had just broken and I could see a fresh stain spreading on her dress. Panic seized me. This was it. I stepped from behind the camera and told him we had to go. I turned to the mukbang guy, who was just staring at us. I apologized and explained that we couldn't finish the video because we needed to get to the hospital immediately. He didn't move his huge, static frame. His small eyes narrowed with a chilling anger. He boomed a refusal, shouting that we were under contract and that there were still 6 minutes left. He commanded us to get back on camera. My wife whimpered as tears welled. He looked monstrous, like a true hippo. He looked like he could devour both of us if we didn't obey. I was terrified and my legs were trembling. But then I saw my wife in pain, scared and vulnerable. I cursed myself for putting her in this situation and for letting greed outweigh the memory of what he truly was. I had to overcome the fear, so I gathered every scrap of courage I had left. I looked him dead in the eye and raised the camera I was holding. Then I deliberately dropped it. It clattered loudly on the dirty floor. I told him with a steady voice that we were leaving. I grabbed my wife's arm and pulled her up gently. He shrieked that we couldn't leave because we had signed the contract, and he struggled slightly in his chair, but he couldn't move. That weight was his prison. We ran out of that awful house as fast as we could. Behind us, his screams echoed, filled with impotent rage. Getting my wife to the hospital was all that mattered in that moment. She was scared and exhausted, but she was finally safe. Soon after, our beautiful baby was born. As for the video, the 9 minutes we recorded went massively viral. It got 56 million views because of the drama. The footage of my pregnant wife's water breaking, my panic, me dropping the camera, and his screaming was a total train wreck, but it was real to the viewers. It actually ended up reviving his career. I still don't know if he will ever pay the remaining $300,000. I am now a 72-year-old man. This happened long ago, but I remember it so well. The background was a series of events that placed me in a mountain cabin outside of Frederick, Maryland, circa 1969 or 1970. I had dropped out of college. My father had died very badly, and I was alienated. I needed to get my mind right. The opportunity to move to an isolated cabin to live in contemplation and solitude was welcome. To the best of my memory, I was there 8 to 9 months. No TV, but books and radio. I had a library card, and I can't remember if I even had a phone. The story begins when a month into my stay, a female beagle showed up at my door. She was a lost dog, and I took her in. Never could train her to do anything, but I fed her, and she was a sweet, if not the brightest dog. A few months in, I began to feel a presence around the isolated cabin. Hard to describe, but I felt like someone was watching, on many occasions. I thought someone might even be looking into my cabin window, watching us. The next phase was the shadowing or following. I knew the folks a half-mile down the lane woods, all around, and would sometimes visit them at night. Something was waiting for me and followed closely in the woods. You could hear it easily, footsteps in the woods, and it picked up its pace as I did. This not only happened to me, but to my younger brother who visited, and to friends, and it spooked them. At night, it was out there around the cabin. And here's the funny thing. I was never afraid, never felt threatened. Not at all, at least early on. There was no feeling of malevolence. I spent a good bit of time wandering the vast areas of woodlands around me. There was a state park just up the hill, and the Frederick Municipal Forest went on for mile after mile. The whole of western Maryland was much more country than it is now. None of the development had set in yet. In our hikes, the dog and I, we came across evidence of campsites, recent ones in the woods. There were traces of fires, old abandoned buildings that had corners that gave shelter and looked slept in, garbage, food and drink, perhaps hunters, but much of it did not have the organized feel that you would get from experienced hunters. The last month of my stay there was when things intensified. Maybe he sensed I was preparing to leave. In the mornings, I would find small, dead animals at the bottom of the front porch steps. The cabin had a small front porch screened with a light door and 4 wooden steps to the ground. A spotlight would illuminate the long front yard with woods close by on either side. Dead animals began to appear at the bottom of the steps many mornings. I remember small birds, then a squirrel, a rabbit, even a weasel one day like they were offerings. I had to grab them up before the dog ate them, and this went on almost daily for several weeks. One night very late, I was awoken by some sound. I lay in bed and heard something from the front porch. I hopped up and hit the lights. I saw that hound dog who never learned to sit or stay standing at the front door in a perfect pointer position. She was shaking in fear. She never barked. I heard the door slam and footsteps down the steps. I hit the spotlight but saw nothing. I went out. He had been on the porch at my front door, maybe trying to enter. After that, I stayed in at night more and more. The animal offerings got bigger and bigger. Larger birds, an opossum, a woodchuck. It really wasn't funny. The final 2 gifts were legs either from horses or even cows. Big and bloody. one was skinned. Dear God. And the second to last day, the dog left me. I could hear her in the woods howling on a trail following a scent. I looked for her in every way I could, came up in the following weeks, but to no avail. She left as she came. I moved back to Maryland's suburbs of DC, got an apartment with a friend, got a job and moved on with my life. One day, not long after, I picked up the Washington Post, and there was an article about recent encounters with the Sykesville monster. It's described as a tall, Yeti-like creature, fur covered on two legs that would pick out a family or person and give them attention. I wasn't the only one. That attention described in the article was exactly what had happened to me, following you at night. Looking inside the house, gifts, and so on. I was shocked. If I had turned on that spotlight and seen a Bigfoot or Yeti, I might still be running. But I think I know who it was. Sykesville. Maryland was the location of the Springfield Hospital Center, a large state psychiatric hospital. It was 20 miles or so east of Frederick, and back then, many folks knew how to live in the woods. They grew up that way, country folks. I think the monster was actually an escaped patient or just a free schizophrenic who lived outside. This is like all the homeless you see in the cities now. Probably off his meds, but somehow functional and just lonely. He would pick people or families to adopt, so to speak. The camps in the woods could have been him. Nothing to do. He would make mischief. I think he liked me, but sensed that I was leaving. Now I can't prove any of this. It's just my theory. My monster was very much of that time and place, and his behavior was what I noticed in nearly every case then. I don't think he could have survived until the 1980s. The institutionalization of mental hospitals threw the mentally ill out into the streets and took away the shelter of hospitals, unprotected. The mentally ill do die, but once in a while they find their way to you. Even now, as an old man, I look back at those mountain woods and realize that for a brief moment in time, I wasn't nearly as alone as I thought I was. Even if my companion was someone the rest of the world had forgotten or feared.
I have a story to share that has truly traumatized me for quite a while now. I feel like this is a good place to tell it because I need to get it out. I am from New Zealand and over here. We have the occasional missing person or a scary murder case, but it is otherwise a very safe country where not much goes on. Because of that, as a 19-year-old girl, I always felt comfortable walking the streets at night or going on hikes alone. Everyone generally looks out for one another. You don't grow up expecting danger in the woods. This happened in the summer of 2019. My boyfriend and I were headed out on a picnic date to a spot we had visited many times. It is called the Karakariki Track. It sits at the end of a very long, windy and rural farm road off of the state highway. To get there, you have to drive for about 15 minutes. You travel deep along a stretch of farmland. At the very end, there is a large cul-de-sac and a massive surrounding farm. The owners of the farm have left the land open to the public. It is a reserve because it is filled with beautiful native trees and wildlife. About a 15-minute walk from the parking lot, there is a small waterfall where you can go swimming. The track is very popular because it is one of the closest swimming spots to Hamilton, the nearest city. It is a scenic and beautiful place where you cross footbridges and pass by creek beds. Farmers still work the land, so there are fenced-off areas the public can enter while the agricultural work continues. On this particular day, my boyfriend and I were really happy. The parking lot was completely empty. It was a super hot summer's day, which was rare for that time, and we felt lucky to have the place to ourselves. As we arrived, we saw the local farmer crossing through the gate on a quad bike with his cows. He was an older man we had spoken to before, since we were regular visitors. He smiled and waved at us as he went about his work. We set off toward the waterfall, crossing a footbridge and passing through a large paddock full of cows. The track there is quite narrow, with the creek sitting right next to it, down a steep bank. So you have to be careful where you step. We reached the waterfall. We decided against swimming because we realized we hadn't brought any towels. We turned around and headed back toward the car park. On our way back, we decided to take a small detour. We went down a steep gravel-off ramp from the track. This led to a more private, tree-covered area right by the water. We were enjoying the quiet, kissing and relaxing. I was lying on my tummy reading a book while my boyfriend sat up playing on his phone, rubbing my back and playing with my hair. We were there for about 10 minutes. I turned my head and glanced up the gravel path. Way up on a hill, through one of the farmer's gates, I saw a large man on a quad bike. I didn't recognize him. He was just sitting there, perfectly still, staring down at my boyfriend and me. I don't even want to think about how long he had been watching us before I noticed him. I quietly told my boyfriend what I saw, which made him turn to look as well. As soon as the man realized we were both looking at him, he opened the gate. He started driving down the hill toward us. We immediately got up to leave. We didn't want to have an awkward conversation with a farmer about being romantic on his land. That is what we assumed was about to happen. However, the situation was much worse than a simple scolding. The man came down the track and drove his quad into the creek. He left the engine running while it sat in the water and climbed off. He started talking to himself loudly, saying over and over that he had messed up his quad. He said he had damaged his engine. He seemed agitated before he even got near us. My boyfriend and I were gathering our things to leave when the man began heading toward us. He didn't offer any small talk or a friendly greeting. Instead, he immediately asked us if we had seen any fish, explaining that he was looking for some fish to kill. My boyfriend calmly responded that there were no fish in that creek because it was fresh water, suggesting that the man might have better luck trying to catch some eels instead. This suggestion sent the man into a sudden fit of anger. He yelled that he didn't want any effing eels and repeated that he wanted to kill some fish. I made a point not to look the guy in the eye. I didn't want to draw the conversation toward myself because I was already extremely freaked out. I didn't want him to notice my fear. My boyfriend was always the calmer, stronger one in situations like this. But for a brief second, I did look at the man's face. I noticed it looked slightly deformed. Since I work in aged care, I thought it might be Bell's palsy. As I stood back up from tying my shoelace, I noticed something terrifying. There was a pistol tucked into the man's waist. I want to emphasize how shocking this was. That was the first and last time I have ever seen a real-life handgun. It is incredibly hard to get a firearm in New Zealand, especially after the strict regulations following the Christchurch shooting. To make matters worse, he didn't just have one. He was waving a second pistol around in his hand as he talked to my boyfriend about killing fish. He would aim it down at the creek and swing it around. My boyfriend gave me a look that I can only describe as stern. That single look spoke a million words to me. He nodded toward the hill leading back to the track. I grabbed our 2 bags and faked a check of my phone. I told the man that our family was waiting for us back at the car park and we had to go. He completely ignored what I said. Instead, he made a comment about how I had a cool hat on, saying something completely irrelevant to the situation. I said a quick goodbye. I started making my way up the hill. In my mind, I was terrified. I didn't want to look back for fear of seeing my boyfriend get shot. I knew our best bet was for me to get up the hill onto the narrow path where the quad bike couldn't follow, then sprint toward the farmer's house. As I was walking away, the man told my boyfriend that he had a really pretty girl. It felt like all the dark intentions I didn't want to believe were confirmed. I honestly felt like I was going to die. My boyfriend, remaining brave, gave a quick thanks and said we would be off now, then followed me up the hill. Even as we moved away, the man kept talking as if the conversation was still going on. He just stood there, gun in hand, watching us leave. As soon as we were out of his sight, we sprinted as fast as we could all the way back to the car park. When we got there, we noticed empty gun shells. There were over 10 shells scattered on the ground. We ran into 2 girls in bikinis who were arriving and quickly informed them about the man and the gun. They got into their cars and left immediately. We tried to go to the farmer's house to see if he knew who the man was, but the farmers weren't home anymore. The thought of those guns still haunts me. They looked old and rusty. My boyfriend suggested they might have been illegal heirlooms handed down to him. This incident has stayed with me for years. My boyfriend and I haven't been able to return to that spot, which is heartbreaking because it's where we had our first date. For about a year afterward, I had to drive past the road leading to that track during my commute, and it always made me feel physically sick. I could have lost my life or my partner that day. I am forever grateful for the man my boyfriend is, who was able to stay calm and lead us away. He communicated exactly what I needed to do through just a look. He told me afterward that he was ready to die if he had to. Knowing the man had been watching us from the hill and hearing his compliment made it clear that he had very scary intentions. This experience has changed me. I am much more fearful now when I travel into the bush alone, something I had done happily my entire life. No matter how much I wish it wasn't the case, I must insist that this story is completely true. I was not drunk, nor was I under the influence of any drugs. Neither was my friend. I truly fear his state of mind might have been permanently altered due to his terrifying experience with these beings. Secondly, I like to consider myself a rational thinking type of person, with years of experience hunting and hiking. I have seen all kinds of local fauna and flora throughout my life, so I'm confident that I did not confuse what I saw for something entirely different or common to the area. It all started then. I went to a friend's house to celebrate his birthday. He was turning 18, and I was already 18 myself. His uncle, a man even more native to the land than myself, was 27. We can call him James. I finally arrived at his house at about 4 p.m. that night on January 25th. Since he effectively lived in the middle of nowhere at the foothills of the Rockies, I was keen on bringing something with me, in case I ran into some trouble like a bear or a mountain lion. So I brought along my .357 Magnum and some binoculars, just in case my friend wanted to try and hunt some coyotes with his rifle. We started doing our normal routine for most of the day, which included playing games on his computer, watching some TV, and just chilling out while talking about school. And his parents were away on a business trip. They had left James and his uncle the house to themselves. The thing that James loved the most in the world was easily his dogs. He had 2 chocolate labs and a golden retriever. The retriever was fairly old. This being Wyoming, where people do not really give a hoot about strict leashes, the dogs were left out all day. They came and went as they pleased back to his house. Sometime around 8 or 9 p.m., we heard his dogs begin barking at something off in the distance. At this point, the sun was long gone, but the full moon provided an amazing amount of light against the winter landscape. I looked through the window. Even with the moon shining brightly against the white snow, I could not see anything up to the tree line that was nearly a mile away. I told James that there was nothing out there. James whispered back. He asked if I was sure, and noted that the dogs did not even bark at deer anymore. The whole situation felt very weird. Fast forward an hour, and his dogs had not been heard or seen since. His uncle was buzzed and watching something on their huge TV, but James was beginning to worry that something had happened to his dogs. Now, wolves can still be very dangerous in the Rockies and take down dogs. This was the moment where I started to get anxious, partly because he wanted to get his dogs back, and partly because wolves sometimes kill sheep or even cows. If they were desperate, they would take us. Even still, those dogs were his family, so we grabbed our guns and we headed outside. We were armed with heavy clothing, as well as my .357, the binoculars, and his .223 rifle. We braced ourselves and headed out. In the Wyoming winter, with temperatures reaching 20 degrees below freezing, we went in the direction of where we last saw his dogs. The whole time we walked toward the tree line, my veins were flooded with adrenaline. It was the same feeling I got every time I hunted, but tonight, we definitely were not the hunters. We were about 300 yards away from the tree line when James suddenly stopped. I almost ran into him. He just stared at the tree line. He kept whispering for me to look at the trees. Slowly, he raised his left index finger towards the foothills of the mountains. He readied his rifle and pointed it towards them. I noticed at this point that his breathing was extremely rapid and raspy, like he had just witnessed a fatal car crash right in front of him. At that point, I honestly did not know what he saw. I scanned the tree line over and over. I crouched down to sit on the snow and used the binoculars towards where he pointed. It took me about 30 seconds, but eventually I saw what scared him. There was something out there, and it was not human, and it was not his dogs. Something on 4 legs came out from behind a tree at the edge of the forest. It was 3 feet tall. At first I assumed it was a wolf, or maybe even a small bear. A few seconds later, several more of these things came out of the woods. I did not pause to try and count them exactly. There were at least 6 or 7, and who knows how many more were still hiding in the trees. We watched them slowly walk out of the trees for several minutes. These animals seemed strangely cautious and slow. Then they eventually stopped as a howl from a dog or wolf came out from behind us. It was far enough away for us to not worry, but close enough for the unknown animals out there to hear. I looked back through the binoculars and could almost make out the general texture of these creatures. They were now about 275 yards away. They looked pale and thin. They still appeared to be like wolves. My heart began to race when I saw what they did next. These things, whatever they were, picked up their pace fast, reaching speeds of what looked like 15 to 20 miles per hour, closing the distance. This was almost right at us. After a minute or so, James lost his nerve and tried to run away. I grabbed him and threw him on the ground as he started to run, but this caught them. The beasts stopped. James and I, frozen with fear, sat down in the snow with our weapons ready. I almost lost it as well when I noticed that the eyes of these things reflected the moonlight. They were orange in color. They did not really glow like in some stories of cryptids. They were more piercing and reflective. We stared at them, and they stared back at us for what seemed like hours. Then one of these creatures stood up on its back legs. At this moment, all of my knowledge on hunting and animals was rendered meaningless. I knew some animals could stand, but never for very long. I audibly counted to see how long it stayed like that. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then James screamed and pointed his .223 to the right. I looked and saw a creature on the left begin to run. Dumbfounded, I turned my attention to the rest of them and told James to keep watching the one that ran away. I did a quick count of the ones that remained, the ones staring us down. There were only 4. My heart pounded out of my chest because there was no way we could have lost something so large on these plains. They are completely flat and covered in snow. I saw it. It was crouched down and trying not to be seen. I realized how smart these things were, much smarter than I would have ever expected. These things were flanking us, I whispered to James, my suspicion. He confirmed he had the same thought. I made up a quick plan in my head and relayed the best course of action to James. I told him to start backing away slowly while maintaining eye contact. As soon as I finished telling him my idea, I did another quick count. Now there were only 3 pairs of orange eyes. Another one had gone somewhere. The one that first stood was walking towards us. I helped James up and told him to keep an eye on our right side while I looked to the left. We backed away, but these beasts walked with us, maintaining their distance the whole time. Eventually, we were only about 100 yards from his house before we turned and ran to his front door. We booked it towards his porch lights, no longer caring to be coy about the situation. Foolishly, I stopped 50 feet short of the porch and turned around. Maybe it was curiosity, but I regretted it the moment I did it. My body seized up the moment I saw it. Those creatures stopped. With the creatures ever so slightly illuminated by the porch lights, I realized that these things seemed otherworldly. They were tall, probably 6 or 7 feet, and they were insanely thin and lanky. They were so pale, and they stared right back with those intense orange eyes from before. I just looked back, feeling less afraid but more curious. A few seconds later, James screamed at me. I shook off my confusion and raced toward his place. I jumped inside and bolted the door, all while his drunk uncle swore at us for making too much noise. I looked out of the windows with my gun in hand, but I did not see a thing. There was nothing but fresh tracks. I pulled the curtains back and we heard the strangest noise ever. It sounded like a dog's howl, but it repeated in pulses like it was coming from a Siamang gibbon, using different pitches and tones. The uncle looked like he instantly sobered up after hearing it. He started locking all the doors and windows in the house. To our surprise, all of James's dogs were back, but they were very frightened and confused, cowering in a corner. We watched through the windows. We stayed up for almost the entire night until I eventually needed to fall asleep. We never had any other problems since that night. Whatever these things were, they were fast, smart, and new to me. It looked like some strange dogman straight from tribal legend. I am not a superstitious type of guy, but I hope it was somehow just a dream, even if my friend and his uncle recall it.